All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another session of foreign entry and foreign expansion. Today, we are going to learn about incorporation in Dubai, Singapore, and US, and we are also going to learn how to draft an MOU. So, the significance of today's class is that whenever you attempt freelancing work, you will have a lot of opportunities for drafting MOUs and also for advisory work on incorporations in various countries. So today Bhargav is going to take us through three countries, and there is also a lot of extensive material available on LMS. If you want to look into incorporation for other countries other than Dubai, Singapore, and US, you can definitely have a look. We have chosen these three countries because business has been very prominently established there, especially when it comes to, foreign entities being registered and incorporated. So over to you, Bhargav. We can begin today's concept.
We'll start with MOU first. Instead of getting directly to the drafting of MOU, I'll first, tell them as to what MOU is.
Sure.
Okay. So can we start with MOU slide?
Bhargav, before we begin with the slides, would you like to give an introduction as to, about incorporation and what is the link between a memorandum of understanding and why is it necessary for incorporating entities like business entities?
I mean, to be honest, there's no, connection between the two. I mean, memorandum of understanding is one thing and incorporation of the companies is another.
Yeah.
Just that once the companies are formed, only like certain entities can enter into a memorandum of understanding. Like, say for an example, states can enter into a memorandum of understanding, and even companies can enter into a memorandum of understanding. There can be a MOU between a state and a company, a partnership and a company, or a partnership and a state. So there are several permutations that you can do with various entities.
Yeah,
And
so basically, an MOU is a pretty versatile document that can be used for.
it is true. One of the good, advantages of, you may call it advantage, or it's both advantages and disadvantages. One of the best things about MOU is that it is not binding. I mean, that way it gives flexibility for both parties to do what they want to do with their objective.
Yeah.
So to begin with, a memorandum of understanding is an agreement or a document which outlines the objectives of two parties. It outlines the goals of two parties. So essentially, a memorandum of agreement, a memorandum of understanding is not an agreement per se. Can we move to the first slide, Priyanka? Yeah. So,
Guys.
the objectives, these are the objectives of a memorandum of understanding. The first is it clears the intention of parties. See, let's say, for obvious reasons, a memorandum of understanding has to be between two parties. Like I said, it can be between two states, or it can be between any two entities. There, when the two entities come together, they have to clearly state as to what their intention is. And it has been widely accepted, and many experts even go on to say that a memorandum of understanding is something that is between a mere handshake, and contract. So in a memorandum of understanding, both parties have to clearly state as to what their intention is. Let's say for an example, Modi ji, on behalf of government of India, decides to enter into a memorandum of understanding with, let's say, some XYZ, let's say Tesla, the company is Tesla. And they both enter into a memorandum of understanding. In here, they won't say that, okay, you're going to sell, say 100 cars and we are going to buy the cars. That sounds more like an agreement. But in an MOU, this is what, in fact, the government of India wanted to bring in Tesla into India, but I don't think that happened. Tesla decided to move to Indonesia. That's a different story altogether. But let's say, hypothetically, they had an MOU. They had an MOU. Like they were able to draft an MOU together. This is how it would go. Modi, or the government of India would ask Elon Musk to set up a manufacturing unit in India, okay, as a promise for providing a rebate of tax, or there would be some kind of cut in the import duty or taxes. So this is a memorandum of understanding. In most cases, in a memorandum of understanding, there's not going to be a consideration, unlike in an agreement or a contract. So that's the main difference between a contract and a memorandum of understanding. And coming to point number 2, it underlines work carried out. We have come across several projects where two parties come together or two entities come together and they chalk out the entire plan as to what they're going to do. Let's say, every now and then we have this Aero show in Bangalore, which happens almost every year. During Aero show, they don't have agreements. They actually have memorandum of understanding. The government of India has memorandum of understanding with various countries around the world. In that memorandum of understanding, they agree that okay, they're going to perform some kind of exercises during the air show, and on behalf of the government of India, they are going to share some kind of technology with the foreign country while they are here. This is the kind of work that they are going to chalk out during this period. And the third is no legal guidance required. No legal guidance required because, like I said, it is not binding. When I say not binding, if something goes wrong, if the MOU goes south, or one of the terms in the MOU goes south and somebody breaches the MOU, you still cannot go to court, and you don't have to follow a certain set of principles like in a regular agreement or a contract. And negotiation, when we come to negotiation, both parties can negotiate. In a contract, like let's say you're going to deliver so and so, let's say you're going to deliver 100 oranges for say 1,000 rupees, and there's no negotiation. There's no negotiation per se in the contract. It's just a direct deal. But in case of memorandum of understanding, you're going to say, okay, you will say provide employment to so and so people. Let's say 1 lakh people in our country, and we are going to provide roads and free electricity to you. So this is more like a negotiation. So that's memorandum of understanding for you. Can we move on to next slide, Priyanka? So yeah, it is said that a memorandum of understanding is, it's something between a handshake, a bare handshake, and a contract. Why? Because like every time, let's say you meet a friend and you guys catch up after a long time and you both shake hands, and then you decide, okay, we both should start some kind of a business. But does it have any kind of like a binding nature? Nothing at all, right? I mean, doesn't even lay out a plan as to what you want to do with it, right? So that's basically, handshake is just handshake. It's a bare handshake, and it has nothing, like no meaning to it. But an MOU is different. An MOU chalks out a plan, and you are going to, there are going to be an obligation on both ends. For example, like I gave an example, if a government of India was to enter into an MOU with Elon Musk, they would have to provide certain rebates and certain tax holidays to Elon Musk so that he would bring in Tesla or the manufacturing unit into India. But as in contract, when you put down anything in the contract, let's say you put on certain terms in the contract, and if there's a breach of contract, you can go to court and you can sue the other party, but that's not the case in MOU. Can we move to next slide, Priyanka? So to oversimplify as to how this MOU or contract or the handshake works, dating is more like a handshake. You date, like several people. Some of you, like may have dated, I don't know, like some of us may have dated 2-3 people. You date, and tomorrow you decide, okay, something's wrong, and then no repercussions. There's nothing. You don't have to face anything at all, right? After dating, you break up with them, it's fine. But MOU is more like an engagement. You put on a ring, you ask them out you ask them out, and they say yes, everything goes fine. But still, are you like really obliged to like marry them? Not necessarily, right? I mean, in the middle, you can, like part ways, and if there are differences, you may find, like you probably discover that okay, this is not working out between us, and then you can still, that keeps happening a lot. Yeah, recently, I mean, people keep signing MOUs every now and then. So, like I was saying, MOU is more like an engagement. Like you put on a ring, but still you can break up, right? But then again, there's some kind of taboo that you cannot simply break up with the person. You'll have to go with like a lot of pain and struggle. Only then you can break up from the engagement. So that's very similar to MOU. But then again, if something goes wrong, if things go south and if things go bad, you cannot approach the court, right? So that's MOU for you, and that's something very similar to engagement. I'm giving this example only with an intention to oversimplify this. And a contract is more like a wedding. You both of you know each other. You put down everything on the paper, and then you tie a knot. Okay, and tomorrow let's say you have some kind of issues with the other party. Let's say the spouse, like you have an issue with your partner. The only way you can dissolve the wedding would be to go to court. Similarly, in a contract, let's say there's some issue between the parties, party A and B, and if there's a breach of contract, like the only way to resolve it is by negotiation or by going to the court. And you sue each other, and then there's going to be damages and damages, and they could be some kind of punitive direction. So that's what comes after a wedding, or when there's a breach of contract. So this is a similarity. So I gave this example so that you people understand as to what's the difference between an MOU and a contract. An MOU is not binding, but a contract is, right? Priyanka, can we move on to the next one? Next slide. So yeah, this is the difference between an MOU and contract. An MOU is a document that shows that two parties have agreed to cooperate to achieve an objective. Here, two parties come together and they cooperate with each other to achieve an objective. There's a goal, there's a set of goals that needs to be achieved. And that's why people come together. But in a contract, it is a mutual agreement where two or more parties consent to a legally binding agreement. Like I said, it's legally binding, and they both consent to what they're going to do about it. And enforceability, the next one is enforceability. And MOU is, like I said before, MOU is not legally enforceable, but a contract is. And the aim aims to show that two parties have a mutual understanding. In this, under the aim, both parties express as to how they are going to arrive at the drafting of the MOU, or how they're going to achieve the goals, or even the objectives. But in the contract it aims to document the obligation of both parties, distribute and minimize the risk if one party fails to perform as per the contract terms. This is what I said. If things go wrong, they can always go to the court and sue the other party. Can we move to the next slide, Priyanka? Yeah, not the state. We'll go with the company, not state and center. Yeah, we'll go with the companies. Okay, this is an MOU between two private parties. Okay, the most important thing in an MOU is objective. You have to spell out as to what your objective is, what you're going to do by coming together. So let's read the objective here. Here's a company. One is Action for Enterprise Kumar, and the other one is Alpha Company. The objective of this memo is to express the willingness of both parties to engage in an effort to promote the competitiveness of Alpha Company, as well as its activities to develop and expand relationships with producers of herbs and spices that they source from. These producers are also referred to micro, small, and medium scale enterprises, or MSMEs. See, even in the objective, they do not speak about the consideration Uh, the only thing that they are trying to achieve here is that the competitiveness of alpha company. They want to promote the alpha company to be the alpha company in the market. That's what they are trying to achieve here. So it is very important to set out the objective. Let's say there's government and um, there's a construction company. Okay, even they can have an MOU. There have been times when there have been instances where two contracting parties come together to enter MOU, so only with the sole intention of experimenting. For example, let's say you come across a new construction company, but you're not aware of them, you've never heard of them. Okay, and there's only one way to figure out as to what the kind of the nature of work that they do, or the kind of things that they do. So what you do, you enter into an MOU with them. You say, okay, see man, let's enter into an MOU, because I don't know what you deal with, I don't know what kind of construction you carry out. I would like to see your work, right? I would like to see your work, and if things work out, we can enter into a legally binding contract. Until then, let's have some kind of an MOU, some kind of an understanding, and we can work it out. If things work out, we can take it forward. So most people, like MOU is a stage where people actually experiment, and it is also called as a precursor to a contract. Before you enter into a contract, this is a precursor. Like you experiment. If things work out, you move ahead. If things don't work out, you drop it. So, and you spell out everything in the objective as to what you're going to do in the MOU. Now, can we scroll down, Priyanka? These are the general terms of MOU. Every MOU should state out and spell out as to how long the duration is going to be. It is up to you. There's no a stipulation as to how long it should run. It can be 1 year, it can be even 1 day. The MOU can be only for a day, it can be for months, it can be for several years. So it's up to you. But it is a must. You have to spell out the duration in the MOU. The next is coordination or the cooperation. As to, like I said, I gave an example of the Aero show in India, where the Indian aviation, the Indian fighter jets, the pilots of fighter jets are going to cooperate and coordinate with foreign fighter jets. They will come together and they understand as to how they're going to perform a certain exercise. This is all about coordination. In this case, let me read out the sentence. In order to carry out and fulfill the aims of this agreement, each party will appoint an appropriate person to represent its organization and to coordinate the implementation of activities. Alpha Company and AFP Kumar staff will meet regularly, preferably with 2 days notice, to discuss progress and plan activities. This is, like I said, like people come together and discuss as to how they're going to implement the plan. 2.3 is technical and financial support. In here, they are going to spell out as to what is the technical know-how one party is going to give and what is the financial support the other party is going to give. Sometimes it so happens that, like a single party may not have both technical know-how and also the financial or the funding. So sometimes what happens, one party provides the technical know-how and the other party agrees to provide the financial support. And that has to be put in as well. And this may or may not be, like added. It's up to you. This is your discretion. The next pointer is confidentiality. This is very important. Very important. You have to state as to what are confidential informations, what can be shared with the third party or what could not be shared with the third party. This is very important. And termination of MOU. And you can also stipulate as to when the MOU will come to an end, or like it can be it can come to an end after a certain period of time, or it can also come to an end after completion of a particular project. But this is important. You have to put in the termination of MOU. This clause has to be there. Extension of agreement. This is again discretionary. Like you can either extend the agreement or the MOU, the memorandum of understanding, or you can simply put an end to it. Once the exercise or once the project is completed, there's no necessary for the extension of the agreement. So like I said, this is discretionary. This is left to you. Communication, this is mandatory. You have to use this clause in every memorandum of understanding, because you are going to state, I mean, spell out as to how, if there's a notice or if there's some kind of communication which needs to be sent from one person, one party to another, you are going to state out as to how it will be sent, whether it will be through an email or it's going to be through RPAD or a registered mail. You have to like clearly state as to how any message or any uh, a communication would be sent. Addendum, yeah, you'll have to put addendum as well. Every MOU may or may not have an addendum. Addendum is basically uh, more like an appendix which comes in the end. Like an addendum can contain explanation as to a certain terms. An addendum can also be mostly like a PS or postscriptum as to a clarification with respect to certain clauses. Yeah, something like an exhibit as well. Yes, exhibit. You can call it an exhibit or, like I said, an appendage or an appendix. Anything. It's up to you. Yeah. And the next is insurance. This is not real. I mean, insurance. It's like, again, like it's your discretion. You can include insurance, or you may decide to leave the insurance as well. Sometimes you may not need insurance at all. If a deal or if the MOU is only for a day, you can skip the insurance. But if the MOU is going to survive for, let's say, for a couple of months, 6 months or 1 year or more than 1 year, you need insurance. And I mean, there's one more clause that you can add in. It is the indemnification. If things go wrong as to who's going to indemnify who, blah blah blah, that can also be included in memorandum of understanding. So this is the gist of it. And the other provision is, it depends on case-to-case basis. I mean, it's up to you. You can go through it. This also talks about income tax, VAT, and share payments. If there's a payment or consideration involved, you can check out that as well. They can include them, but that is not necessary. It depends on case-to-case basis. And we have another MOU for the state and the center, but we are not going to discuss that. It will be sent to you for your reference. And like you can go through both MOUs and understand as to how an MOU is drafted. Yes, it will be shared. It will be shared with everyone. Priyanka, can we move to incorporation of yeah. Yeah, let's I have one question. Yeah, I forgot to ask this question before we start with the incorporation of companies. I previously said that MOU is not legally binding, but there's one clause or there's one term which is legally binding, which can be, if violated, can be enforced in the court of law. And can anyone answer as to which clause or which term is that? Is one term or one clause in MOU? If violated, you can approach the court of law. Am I clear? No, not indemnity.
But it is indemnity, if I'm not wrong.
No, it's not indemnity. Even if there's an indemnity clause, if something goes wrong, you cannot really go to the court of law. But there's one, confidentiality. Confidentiality. That's right. If you share the know-how or the technical know-how or the technological know-how, you share as to how a certain thing is made or a certain thing is manufactured, and then the other party leaks out the information, you can take them to court. So on that ground, you can always approach the court of law. And there's one more ground, which is not very important. It doesn't usually happen when there's consideration involved in MOU, and if one person or one party incurs loss at the instance of other party, then you can approach the court. But that doesn't always happen. But yeah, even there was there in 2019, there was a contract. There was an MOU between US and US and China. And at that point of time, one of the interviewers, they asked Donald Trump. At that point of time, he was the president. So they asked him, like, what do you think about MOUs? He was like, he literally said that MOUs are shit, they're really bad. I don't like MOUs because they mean nothing. You enter into an MOU and they mean nothing. Nobody really goes with an MOU. Nobody really implements an MOU. So since then, what Donald Trump did was that he, instead of executing MOU with various states or countries, he decided to have trade agreements. Because trade agreements, if violated, you can always approach the arbitration, international arbitration, one of the tribunals, or you can even approach the ICJ. So yeah, that's MOU for you. We'll go ahead with
Hi,
Sir,
I just had one thing, but the MOU has to be registered, or any MOU with it has to be executed legally, right? Only then can you approach the court of law.
yeah, but not necessarily. That's not true. That's not true. It doesn't necessarily have to be. I'll give an example. Even an agreement of sale, agreement of sale, right? An
Yeah.
agreement of sale, like if there's a breach. Okay, Basha, I'll answer your question. But before that, let me answer. Uh, your question was that, like whether it needs to be registered or not, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be registered. Because, see, like I said, MOU is more of an informal agreement between the two parties. And you can still approach the court because the document is going to be in the original form. I mean, if you look at the Indian Evidence Act, any original document will be allowed as long as there are original signatures, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be registered. Even an agreement of sale need not be registered. I mean, it's up to the court to, like if there's an insufficient stamp duty or something, like it's up to the court to inform. But then again, you don't necessarily have to register as long as the document is original and one of the parties admit that, okay, they were privy to this MOU. If they admit that, then you're good to go. And what was the next question? Do you still have a doubt or?
As you
Hello?
said, if the party admits, I am on the point, especially when they challenge the legality, surely they would not admit it. So you have nothing else except for MOU, which is signed. So then again, you cannot challenge anything, or you cannot approach the court of law for anything then.
Yes, you can. That's the issue with, that's what I said initially. It's a double-edged sword. So it works both ways, like you cannot actually approach the court, but you can approach the court only when there's a damage, when there's an injury.
Okay, thank you.
So the other question is it necessary to mention applicable law? No, not. It's up to you. It's up to you. Like it's better to mention applicable law in MOU because if there's a breach of confidentiality clause, it's necessary that like you mentioned the applicable law. You can always approach some arbitration tribunal, and you can also choose the law to be governing the MOU. It's always good to mention the applicable law. The other question is if either party wants to exit and don't want to file the object, then how? Yeah, like I said, they can exit anytime they want, but it will have repercussion and it will look bad on the other party. And they can walk out as long as the other party doesn't incur some kind of monetary loss. If there's a monetary loss, they can approach the court of law. If there's no monetary loss, then it's fine. Like I'll give you another example where we recently had an agreement with one of the as my my firm recently had an agreement, not exactly an agreement. We had some kind of proposal and a letter of intent with one of the companies. Okay, we said we are going to be their legal advisors, but before we could enter into an agreement, we decided that okay, let's explore the option of we'll work on case to case basis. Every time you refer, we'll charge according to the case. It's not mandatory. It's up to you. It can be arbitration, or you can even choose regular court of law. It's up to you. It doesn't necessarily have to be an arbitration. It's up to you.
May I?
Yeah, please. Let me finish this. I was answering. If either party wants to exit, don't want to fulfill their, they can, like I said, they can still walk out anytime they want, as long as there's no monetary repercussions. Yeah, please, you were asking some question.
Uh, so you said right now there is no need to get register that document, the memorandum of understanding, right?
Yes.
But yeah, it will be authentical or no? Because it can we can say we can prove in the code that this document is not authentic.
So that's always there. That's always there. I mean, that's a matter of procedure. See, let's not get into the procedural law now. Uh, let's say, like two states enter into MOU. Okay, it's on television everywhere, but they're not going to get it registered. Are they going to get it registered? I mean, who's the authority that's going to register an MOU between two states, right?
Yeah.
So it's not necessary to register an MOU.
But trade agreement is that I think there's need to register the trade agreement if I'm not wrong.
Yes, trade agreement you have to. Trade agreement you
So
have to.
that's why the authenticity is definitely going rise.
Yes,
And
that is true.
importance of the document, it is legally binding. So importance of the document will going to rise on that document,
Trade
right?
agreement has to be registered, but MOU isn't. So that's why I gave an example of
Don't term. Yeah, yes.
because he prefers trade agreements over MOUs because MOUs mean nothing.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
And there's one more, Zeba Shaikh, under which law is it stated that MOUs are? It is not the law. It's just like it's the basic concept. Like it's understood everywhere that MOUs are legally not binding. And yeah, I mean some countries, India to an extent has made MOU binding, but most countries haven't. I mean even India hasn't, but to an extent even India has made MOUs binding because recently we had a case where two of the parties had entered into an MOU and the other parties was able to approach the court and get an order because he incurred some monetary loss. So yeah, in some cases it's binding, in some cases it isn't. Like I said, it depends on like it goes on case to case basis. Any more questions? Yeah, I guess not. Okay,
Yeah, I just have a question. So as you said, in some cases it's binding. So does it depend upon the way a particular clause in the MOU is drafted?
Yes.
If it's like in a binding nature, where it sounds mandatory for the parties to fulfill their obligation, then maybe we can enforce it.
Yes, you can. Yes, I mean I do not remember the case name, but there was in this case. I'll try to find the case law and send it to you. And I'll try to send it to Priyanka.
Okay.
In one of the case laws where it was the nomenclature was MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, but the terms and the conditions chalked out in the entire MOU, sounded more like a contract. So the court came to a conclusion that okay, this is actually a contract, but it's just that the name is MOU, but the intention of the party and the conduct of the parties is entirely different. So it's possible if an MOU has clauses and like terms which are akin to what the terms in a contract would be, yeah, that is enforceable.
Because I also came across an MOU for sale once. So that basically meant that the nomenclature did not matter, but most
in such cases it won't matter.
It was more or less like a sale deed.
That's MOU for sale is basically an agreement for sale.
Right.
It's an agreement for sale. Yes. So yeah. So people do get sometimes you can only blame bad drafting for that. So people they give different names for and they try to overcomplicate things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving ahead with the different kinds of there are, so at least none that I'm aware of. There aren't many kind of MOUs. There's just memorandum of understanding. That's okay. Moving ahead with the incorporation. You can explain again that if either party wants to exit. One moment. Yeah, if either party wants to exit, they can always do. unless there's a monetary loss, they cannot exit. I mean, if they exit, it's going to be a breach of MOU, and the party aggrieved can always approach the court of law or the arbitration tribunal. But this object has to be essential. It has to go to the root of the MOU, and one of the party must incur some kind of losses. Otherwise, it will. I mean, like I said, MOU is nothing. There's not going to be any repercussions. You can still walk out and walk away from the MOU, and nothing's going to happen. Okay, moving on to incorporation of company in the US. The first step is to select a type of business entity. We have discussed about this in the previous class. There are widely accepted four kinds of business entities. That is proprietorship, sole proprietorship. Second one is partnership. Third is LLC.
Venture.
Sorry?
Joint venture?
No, JV, joint venture isn't. Joint venture can be a partnership. Joint venture can be an LLC. A joint venture together can be a corporation as well.
Okay.
Okay. So joint venture won't, we discussed about widely four kinds of entities, business entities. That is sole proprietorship, partnership, LLC, and the fourth one is corporation. So these are the four widely accepted kinds of business entities. So before incorporation, we have to, since it is incorporation has to be with company, right? So we can remove partnership and sole proprietorship. The only two that is left is corporation and LLC. So it is up to us to, what we want to do, like whether we want to start an LLC and incorporate an LLC. An LLC is basically a limited liability company whose owners are called as members and not shareholders. But a corporation, their owners are called as shareholders. That is the main difference between an LLC and a corporation. Okay, so you have to choose between an LLC or a corporation. The next one is selection of a state of incorporation. This is very important because in the US, United States is basically an union of 50 states, right? And it's a federal state, and each state has its own law. Unlike in India we have something called the Companies Act 2013, and we have Companies Act, and which is basically followed by the entire country. But that's not the case in the US. They have to follow state laws and not the federal law. So it is very important as to which state you're going to choose. And most entrepreneurs and a lot of startups, they prefer starting their business in a state called Delaware. If not Delaware, they choose Nevada or sometimes even Florida. But the reason why, and even Arizona state for that matter, but the reason why they choose a particular state is because these states provide tax rebates or tax benefits. Some of the states do not impose tax at all. Let's say, for an example, you intend to open a company in a state like Delaware. Delaware does not start a company and you make profits. Delaware is not going to take any profits from you. And even if they're going to take profits, it will be only 10% or 50% of the entire profit. But let's say, for an example, you go to California or a state like, say, New York. Okay, you start a company in New York, and there's going to be state tax, and then there's going to be federal tax. So you're going to lose out a lot of money from the profits. So it's very important as to where you are going to start the company. And there's one more thing about Delaware. Delaware is considered as one of the highly advanced corporate state. It is said that they have one of the robust corporate structure in Delaware. And one more good thing about Delaware is that they have so many companies and so many litigations have already happened that, when people enter into an agreement or when people start a company, they know as to what the outcome of a litigation is going to be. So most people prefer starting their company in Delaware. And the next one is selection of a company name. The selection of, while selecting a company name, you have to ensure that the company name is not registered in the trademark registry. This is very important because if a company, let's say you want to start a company by name KFC, but your KFC means I don't know, Kanpur fried chicken. Okay. But there's already a KFC which is very famous and it's called Kentucky Fried Chicken. And you approach the registry and say, oh, I want to register my company in the name KFC. The company, the registry obviously is going to deny registering your name. So it's very important you choose the right name, before you start the company. And the next one is that has not been put here. The next one is you have to choose a registered agent to incorporate your company. See, all this could be done, remotely. You don't have to necessarily be present in US while incorporating the company. So it is important that you have a registered agent. Who is a registered agent? A registered agent is a citizen of US who is empowered to register your company. So you need to pay, say, for an example, you pay him $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 as commission. He'll do everything on your behalf. And why do we need a registered agent on your behalf? He's going to deal with the daily business of your company. He's going to receive notices from the state. And if somebody has to pay taxes, it will be paid through him. So you need a representative to representative to take care of the entire business of your company. So that's why it's important to have a registered agent. And the next is filing of incorporation papers. Incorporation papers also include articles of organization. This article of organization is going to have, basically it's article of organization in an LLC basically means it basically articles of organization in LLC basically means bylaws in our country. You're going to state out as to who's going to be what, how many directors are going to be in there, and yeah, bylaws. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. So articles of organization is basically bylaws, and you are going to state out as to what's going to be, how the company is going to be run, and who are the directors. I mean, you will say if the company is going to be run by members. Article of association is for India. In US, it's article of organization, and article of organization for LLC only. For corporation, there's something else. For LLC, it's article of organization. Article of association is for companies in India. So yeah, you file papers, you file the article of organization, and this will contain the names and addresses of all the directors, names and addresses of all the members, and if there's a CEO or a CFO or COO, yeah, even their names and addresses would be put in there. And after this, I think we had discussed about this in the previous class. I had stated that, yeah, it is same. Yeah, it is same. It's just that the name, the nomenclature is different. Yes, it is same. There's not much difference between an articles of association and an organization. And also the operative, I was talking about, you'll have to file the operative agreement as well. LLC is going to have something called operative agreement. The operative agreement basically will give an idea as to how the business is going to be run, how the business would be, like what the prospects of the business is going to be, and who's going to take care of the business, and who are the what they're going to manufacture, where they're going to sell. Is it going to be manufactured indigenously and sold, exported, or are they going to import certain goods? So basically, the operative agreement is going to have every detail about the company, and even this needs to be filed with the registry. And the next is obtaining a federal tax number. Federal tax number is basically employer identification number. You need an employer identification number to set up a company, and you need this to also to open a bank account, and also to file returns with the IRS. IRS is basically Internal Revenue Service. It's like income tax department in our country. So every time like you file your returns with the IRS, you're supposed to have an employer identification number. The next is opening a bank account. This is the tricky part. Opening a bank account during the process of incorporation is the most difficult part, because while opening a bank account, you are supposed to be physically present in the bank. So most people, what they do is that, like when they're remotely trying to operate or, like incorporate their company, they would, like I said, you need to have a registered agent. So they would ask the registered agent to appear before the bank and deal on behalf of the company with all financial transactions. But there's a risk to that. There's a risk to, sending a registered agent. Let's say the registered agent is not very genuine, and your company, you have invested a lot of money, and he can, send the flow of funds to a different direction. He can outsource the funds to some other company, or he can pocket some of the funds to himself. So there's a risk of, having a registered agent in while opening a bank account. So this is one place where it's important that the owner or one of the members comes and, like he actually goes to the bank and opens a bank account. The next is commencement of business. After all of this is done, you start the business. The important thing about, I mean, the important, no, you have to be a US citizen to be registered as an agent. Only US citizens are allowed to be registered as an agent. So we cannot, we simply have to, like take their services. So yeah, that's about incorporation in the US. Do you guys have any doubts?
May I?
Yeah, please.
So it means whoever the citizen of the US, only they can apply for this?
Incorporation, no, anybody, even you and I can, we can. Let's say you want, you want how much time? This usually takes between 30 to 45 days. 30 to 40, the trick, like I said, the tricky part is the, opening the bank account. EIN, I spoke about a federal tax number, that is employer identification number. That's going to take roughly about 10 to 15 days. But, I even went through some, testimonials by people who had actually opened companies. One second, guys. Yeah. I spoke, I even, spoke to some people who had opened it, and they said that, if they're lucky, you can even get EIN within a couple of days, but you just have to be lucky. So yeah, anybody can open it, and it's not necessary that you have to be a resident. You don't even have to be a resident of US. You don't have to be citizen of the US to incorporate a company. And sometimes, like in case of a corporation,
there must be some procedure.
Procedure for what?
If I'm from India, right? I want to open a company in USA, okay? So there must be some procedure, right? They will not allow us directly to do that.
Of course, they are going to allow you. You need to give your passport. Like
Okay.
I said, the first thing you need to do is, you need to have a company name. You need to choose the state, and in that state, okay, remember, in that state, you are going to find a registered agent. And the registered agent is directly going to be in touch with you, and he'll do all the running around. He'll be your errand boy. He's going to run around, do all your jobs. He's going to finish. He'll make sure that your company is incorporated. And it's not necessary that the registered agent has to be a person. It can be a trust as well. It can be a trust, and I'll even give you certain names. Like who are. I had some names here. There's this website called First Base. Okay, if you're really intending to open, incorporate a company in US, there's this website called First Base, and there's also a website called Stripe Atlas. They'll be your registered agent, and they'll do everything on your behalf. You don't even have to be present there. It's just that whatever they may ask for your Aadhaar number, and they may ask for your passport number, and they may even ask for your utility, one of the utility bills. So just to make sure that you actually live in India. So if you provide all of this, they'll be able to do it on your behalf. You don't even have to be present. And for all the correspondence, you don't even need to have a designated place to run the business. You don't need to have a designated place to run the business. It's just that you need to have a post office box or a post box just to receive the letters. If you have a post box, that's good enough. You can, give the number of your post box to exchange all the correspondences with the state or the IRS or any other company.
Okay, the post box you are talking about, right?
Yeah, your post box. When you obtain a post box, it will be. They're simply not going to give a random post office, or post box number. It will be verified before they give it to you. Before they give the number, they are
Okay.
going to verify and then give it. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Can
Charge-
you put the name?
Okay, somebody is asking me about the charges of registered agent. Like I think First Place and Stripe Atlas, for Stripe Atlas, I hear is a little cheap. They charge somewhere between $700 to $1,500. But if you go to a law firm, they're going to charge you about $2,500. Yeah. Any questions? Someone was asking.
Just put the name. You said there's a name. You were saying some name for registration of company, right?
Oh, you want me to type the name of this website? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, these are the two names that you can check out. You can check out their website and see it for yourself. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Okay. Okay. Now moving on to incorporation in Dubai. Before we understand the incorporation in Dubai, you have to choose three main zones in Dubai. Okay, there are basically essentially three zones in Dubai. One is in the mainland. Mainland is basically the main area. For example, in India, the mainland is basically the heart of India. Okay, that's considered as the heart. The entire South India or the entire area is called as India. And the free zone would be the special zones, okay, classified by the government. The free zones are basically the special zones which are classified by the government as free zones. And offshore are basically something like Lakshadweep. Lakshadweep would be called as an offshore, or even Andaman would be called as an offshore. I'm just giving an example. So before you start your business, you have to register your, you have to choose the location as to where you're going to start the company. You have to choose whether it's going to be, it's going to be mainland or free zone or offshore. In mainland, as an outsider, as a foreigner, you can only own up to 49% of the company. I'll come to free zones. Yeah, I'll get there. These are like special economic zones. We have this SCZ. We have this in India as well. Special economic zones where like companies which are started in these areas would not be taxed at all. There are certain benefits to that. I'll get there. So in mainland UAE, if you want to start a business, you can only own up to 49%. And when I say mainland, you can own, you can start a business such as you can start a salon, you can start a bakery shop, you can start a restaurant. These are the things that you would start in mainland. But in free zone, it can be, you have the right to hold 100% of the share. As a foreigner, you can hold 100% of the share. But it's just that, you have to adhere to certain, regulations in the shareholding regulations in the free zone. And, let me read this. A corporation operating in a free zone does not have to adhere to the shareholding regulation. Thus, it is possible for an expat to own all of the company's stock Yeah, it can own all of the company stock, but then again, they say shareholder. Yeah, you don't have to adhere to shareholding regulation, but there are certain rules in the free zone. There are two kinds of free zones. There are just general free zones, and there are also premium free zones. In premium free zones, you are going to be taxed on your business, but in general free zones, you won't be taxed. And one of the things about free zone is that, let's say you are into manufacturing of iPhones in Dubai. Okay, you manufacture some phones. Okay, some phones in Dubai, and you sell all. I mean, you sell all 100 phones, and you make like 100% profit out of it. If you were to be in US, you would be taxed. You would be taxed on the profit to the extent of 15% or 20% or 30%. But in Dubai, the good thing about Dubai, starting a business in Dubai, is that if you make 100 rupees, you can keep 100 rupees all to yourself. You don't even have to pay one single penny to the Dubai government or the tax department. You don't have to pay a single penny, because there is no such thing as income tax in Dubai, especially in the free zone, and there's no corporate tax as well. So that's one major advantage of starting any business in free zone. So usually the kind of businesses that are started in free zone are manufacturing units, or even some people, like you may even start petroleum or gas pipeline. But there's a catch to that. If you start a petroleum business in a free zone, you will be taxed. Only in case of petroleum you're going to be taxed. Otherwise, you're not going to be taxed. And coming to offshore, offshore is suitable for those who want to start companies, like where you don't need a physical place to run the business. Say, for example, e-commerce. And in here, even in here, foreigner or you can own 100%. I mean, full ownership of the company. That's one advantage you have. But the business has to be done outside UAE. You cannot run the business within UAE. Let's say you're selling something on Alibaba and you want to register Alibaba or Amazon or Flipkart in one of the offshore UAE. Okay, you register your company there, but you cannot sell anything within UAE. You have to sell it outside. So you may have all three. Okay. See, when you open a company, when you register a company in a mainland, you can, as a foreigner, you can own only up to 49% of the company. The 51% has to be owned by a localite. That is, a resident of UAE has to own 51% of the company shares. So what does it mean? Essentially, it means that you cannot start. A mainland is basically the mainland. I mean, how am I going to put it? Let's say, for example, mainland China. Yeah, if you look at China, it's called as the mainland China. When people talk about mainland China, they talk about Beijing, Shanghai, and the entire area of China. And in mainland China, I'll tell you what is not included. Tibet is not part of mainland China. Hong Kong is not part of mainland China. Macau is not part of mainland China. Taiwan is not part of mainland China. These places are not called as mainland. Mainland is basically the heart or the main land of the China, or a main land of a certain country. In UAE, the mainland is basically Dubai, Sharjah. These places are called as mainland. The extension, I'll tell you why it's called as not exactly. See, if you, I see, Jacinta, if you look at India, I'll tell you what are the mainlands in India. In India, every state in India is a mainland except for like Andaman and Nicobar is not. See, mainland is different from, since it's an island. It's a completely a different land away from the mainland. It won't become part of the mainland. I hope you're getting my point. I'll give another example. Let me give another example. Okay, let's take an example of UK, that is United Kingdom. When we talk about United Kingdom as a mainland, we are talking about England, we are talking about Scotland, we are talking about the Northern Ireland, and even Wales for that matter. That is called as the mainland of UK. Okay, and the places which are not mainland of UK is basically the British Columbia. British Columbia is like way far away from the mainland. So when we're talking about mainland is, like when you think of something, when you think of a country, there's this general picture that comes to your head. That is the mainland. Whatever the remainder, uh, like I said, the British Columbia, which is way far away, which is somewhere close to Argentina, that won't become part, though it is run by government of UK, though it is under the British government's rule, it won't be considered as part of the mainland UK. I hope you got my point. Do you still have a doubt? Okay, if you, I'll do one thing, I'll share, once this class is over, I'll share a map where, like to explain as to what mainland and what isn't mainland. Like coming to UAE, I mean, people in the Emirates were able to build lands just by using sand. I just hope that you're all aware of that. Not everything in UAE was, like naturally made. Some of the lands were built over the ocean, were built over the sea. It was engineerly, like that's why, UAE is, appreciated for their really good engineering skill, because they were able to build lands. They were able to create lands that never existed at all. So what I'm trying to say is, these lands which were even the palm, I think the Atlantis palm, whatever, I don't know, let me Google. Does anyone know about the palm Atlantis? Priyanka, do you know about it? Palm Island or Atlantis, something like those. The Palm Atlantis, yes, the Atlantis, the Palm in Dubai. That is that is a created land, right? That didn't happen naturally, and that is not part of the mainland. No, to be called as a mainland, it has to, like just generally exist there.
Yeah, and it is governed by construction laws, which are called as the Mukawala contracts in Dubai. And the regulation is entirely different, because there is a separate law governing Mukawala contracts, which are particularly related to construction in Dubai. So even if you are a foreigner, even if you are a resident of Dubai, the entire thing is governed under Mukawala law, which states that, if you have to start a construction company in Dubai, there are certain restrictions, and you can only start it as a contractor. You cannot start you can only take projects as a contractor, okay, if you are a construction company, and you cannot start your own site. So somebody has to entrust the projects to you who is a resident of Dubai. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Jacinta,
Yeah.
someone had doubts as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting a hang of it.
Mm-hmm.
Mainland is basically, it's descriptive. The word itself is descriptive. Okay, let's move on to where were we? Okay. That's one thing. Offshore is basically, like I said, it's away from the mainland, and it is mostly suitable for companies, e-commerce companies. Okay, moving on to next pointer. Any mainland UAE company must have a real office. Like I said, you need to have a real office for to run a mainland. Like I said, you need, if you're going to if you're going to run a salon, you need to have at least a space of 200 square feet. If you're going to run a bakery, but we are talking about companies here. They're not, if they're sole proprietorship, they can be less than 200 square feet. But if it's going to be a company, and if you're going to register that company, the minimum area office space has to be at least 200 square feet. But for a free zone corporation, there's no need for an office. Even a virtual office works for them. We don't necessarily need to run a physical office. And even in case of an offshore company, there's no necessity to have a.
Sorry, what's a free zone?
A free zone is a special economic zone where they're not going to impose any kind of taxes on the profits made.
Could be any part of UAE.
There are I think there are at least 38 free zones in UAE. There are 38 free zones in UAE where you have to pick one of them. And if you start in one of those zones, let's say for an example, I think in Orissa or Assam, they have one of the areas in Orissa or Assam is called as special economic zone, which is very similar to a free zone in Dubai. In those areas, the government is going to give you a lot of facility to run DMCC. I wasn't aware of that. That is a special economic zone. Vishal, is it a special economic zone? Yeah, in Kolkata too. Yeah. If you start businesses in those places, the government is going to give you rebate. They may not impose taxes at all, or in some cases they won't even charge you for electricity using the power. So these are the benefits that you get if you start a business in free zone.
Okay, thanks.
So that's why they call as free zones. And yeah, in offshore, like even there, you don't necessarily have to have a physical office. And moving to the next pointer, the United Arab Emirates does not have any restrictions on business that are based on the country's mainland. They are permitted to conduct business in any free zone in the this is a very important point. Let's say your corporation is your company is incorporated in the mainland. Okay, you choose to start your company in the mainland. If you choose to, if you decide to start your company in the mainland, you can also have like branch offices, or you can also sell your business or the products of your business, and do your business in other zones as well. That is free zone. You can go to free zone. But if you have something, if let's say you are running some liquor shop in the free zone, you cannot go to the mainland and sell your liquor. I'll give another examples. Even an airport is called as a free zone, because in airport you don't have duty, right? In international airport, there's no duty at all. Even those zones are called as free zones. So let's say you have a liquor shop in airport, and you decide to take the liquor, and without you decide to sell those liquor without duty in the mainland. What's going to happen? They're obviously going to catch hold of you and impose some kind of fines, or take some punitive actions, or even cancel your license to run the business. So this is what is going to happen. So you cannot run, if you've set up your business in free zone, you cannot run your business outside the free zone. And the same applies to companies which are registered in offshore as well. Okay. And
see here, as you said, they are permitted to conduct the business in the free zone if they are if they run the business in the mainland. So does that mean, as you said, in the free zone, there's no tax? So if I have my business in the mainland and I'm also conducting in the free zone, then am I tax free?
No, you won't become tax free. Then you still won't become tax free. You still have to see the tax is on the income and the corporate tax count. Since your corporation is in mainland, okay, you're going to be taxed. But
the free zone also.
Yeah, even if you sell your products, or even if you go to free zone, you still have to pay corporate tax and income tax.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's no income tax, but there's corporate tax. Yeah. So the next point is that at the conclusion of each fiscal year, all mainland enterprises are required to conduct an audit, but performing an audit is not necessary in free zone. Like I said, the business is free, the duty is free, because it doesn't make sense to conduct an audit because you're anyway not paying taxes, right? Since you pay taxes in a mainland, you have to, carry an audit and make sure that you pay taxes. But that's not the case in free zone, or even the offshore. Offshore and free zone are pretty much the same. It's just that a free zone can at least have manufacturing units, but the offshore cannot. And you may have heard of, in many Hindi and English, Hollywood movies, you may have come across something called as shell companies. These shell companies, what they do is, these shell companies are opened in Bahamas or Cayman Islands, or even I think Seychelles and several other countries. They open shell companies to hide the black money that is being made in the home country. Even in Dubai, but the law in Dubai is quite stringent, so it's very difficult to open a shell company. But then again, many Indians have managed to open shell companies in the offshore UAE as well. Yeah.
Can you please give example of cities or offshore?
Offshore, in Dubai or elsewhere?
In Dubai?
In Dubai, we have, Palm Atlantis, that itself is an offshore. If you're running, like business on Palm Atlantis, then that would be considered. If there's if there's even a small registered company, like I said, you don't need to have a physical company there. You can just say that, okay, you want to register your company in Palm Atlantis. That's it. That's good enough. You don't necessarily need to have a physical company over there.
Okay,
That's
it's
one.
like Andaman Nicobar in
Yeah,
India.
yeah, something like that. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, and in this case, the next point is the size of a company's office or
How can
workspace.
we find the companies which are in the offshore or which are in the free zone? Is there any website there we can find it? These companies we belong to there.
You have to check with the registry. You'll have to check with the Department of, I think it's Commerce or Economic. They're going to have all the details.
So do you have any website address so that we can find it?
Sorry?
Do you have any website address where we
No,
can find it?
at the moment I do not, but like I'll check and I'll send the link.
Oh,
I'll just make a note of it. Ideal zone depends on the kind of business that he wants to do. Like I said, if it's a manufacturing unit or any other business apart from e-commerce, I would suggest it's always good to go to one of the free zones. So free zone is always better. And there's one more, like there's another catch here, that is UAE is basically it's what is the full form of UAE? It's basically United Arab Emirates. So basically, this country has many emirates, right? Emirates is basically like regions in UAE, and every emirate has its own free zones, and they have their own rules as well. Okay, as to what companies could be allowed and what companies could not be allowed. If you are asking me, I would always suggest that like if a client was to approach you, it's better you suggest them to go to free zone because it's more viable as compared to an offshore company. So, do you guys have any other question? Right. So, there is a question about black money. What about that? Bring money, black money back to India.
we was discussing about the shell company when it was clear.
Shell, yes, shell companies they're used for the purpose of money laundering basically. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, Priyanka, can you move on to next slide?
Sorry,
So-
the previous slide, there was something mentioned about the visa, I guess. We haven't done
Okay,
that.
let's go back to the previous one. Yeah. See, in the size of a company's office or workspace is taken into consideration when issuing a residency visa. See, in this case, in the first case, you need to have a resident visa. Okay, resident. When I say resident visa, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a citizen. Even if I want to see in mainland, if I'm going to open a company in mainland, I'm supposed to go there and actually run the company, or I need someone on behalf of me to run the company. There should be a person, someone. There should be someone physically present there to come run the company. But that's not the case with both, free zone and offshore. I'll read the second one. Similar to mainland UAE company registration, a resident visa is granted based on the size of the. Oh, I think. Oh, it's the resident visa is with respect to the company and not the person. The resident visa is with respect to the company. But that's not. I mean, there's no need for a resident visa for an offshore firm formation because there isn't also any requirement of an office space. Like I said, in mainland, you need an office space, but in free zone, it's up to you. You have a discretion to have an office space, or you can choose not to have an office space. But in offshore, there's no question of office space at all. Or do you still have a doubt?
No, that's okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. This is the step-by-step, timeline and process for setting up business in Dubai. First, the step one is you need to find and hire a UAE national sponsor. UAE national sponsor is a citizen of UAE, like similar to a registered agent in US who's going to do everything on your behalf. So that is a national sponsor. Okay. And the step two is to obtain registered office for a company. Like I said, in case of mainland, you need to find a registered office space, a space for running the company. And in case of free zone, you may, or it's up to you. You can choose to have a registered office, or you can simply, like run with a virtual address as well. And step three is to have a company name. Like in the case of US, you need to have a company name and check with the registry and find out if the name has already been used by someone, or if there's a trademark, pertaining to a particular name. The next is you have to draft MOA and AOA. This is Memorandum of Association and Articles of Association, which is very similar to Article of Organization that we discussed in the incorporation of US companies. So from here on, it's going to be some of the procedures are very similar to what we already discussed in the incorporation of US. The next step is apply company incorporation application with Department of Economic Development and the company's registry. I was talking about this. I wasn't, I did tell you that there's an economic and a department for economic and development and companies registry. That's where you're going to find the details of all the companies. If you want details of all the companies in free zone and the mainland or in offshore companies, this is where you can find the details. And once you incorporate your company, your certificate will be issued to you. That is step 6. And yeah, this is very important. Even we did not speak about this while we were discussing about the US incorporation. It is important that you get the right kind of licenses. It is very important. Let's say you are running a liquor shop. You're supposed to have the commercial license to run the liquor shop. And let's say you are running a salon. You are supposed to get a professional license. And let's say you're running into you're into manufacturing of textiles or some electronic good. Then you'll have to get an industrial license for that. And after that, you have to also get a business bank account, so that if your company is in mainland, you'll have to coordinate with the local government and file taxes when necessary. And the end is deliver all documents and certificates. This is when I say deliver all documents, it includes your passport, it includes your utility bills, it includes any certificate of incorporation which you have from the home country, which has been issued in your home country, and like other documents. That's it. So this is the step to set up a business in Dubai. Can we move on to next slide, Priyanka? So yeah, we pretty much discussed this. These are the documents. You need to have Memorandum of Association and Article of Association, which has been notarized by the local authority in Dubai. And you need to have the passport of sponsor. Sponsor is basically a registered agent in Dubai or in UAE, who is who's going to run around and do everything on your behalf. He's going to incorporate your company on your behalf. So you need to give his passport and NOC from the sponsor. He should give an NOC, a no objection certificate, saying that he doesn't have any issue using his sponsor, and a bank reference letter for each shareholder, because each shareholder needs to have a bank account, because even their system works very similar to what we had in S Corp, where whatever profit has been made will be directly remitted in your bank account, and you would be taxed if necessary. Only if necessary you would be taxed. So it's necessary to have a bank reference letter and passports of managers of the business. Let's say you set up the company and you are the owner of the company. You can choose to run it all by yourself or with the co-owners, or you can appoint a manager or a CEO, and even their passports have to be submitted with the registration. And next is the business plan. You are going to chalk out and give the roadmap as to what your business plan. If you're going to manufacture some electronic gadget, you're going to mention as to, you're going to specify as to what will be the product design and what will be your growth or the plan for next 5 years. That is what the business plan is all going to be about.
Why
And
is the NOC from the sponsor required?
because if he is appearing on behalf of you, and this is in case of mainland. Okay, in mainland, for a foreigner cannot alone start a company, right? He can only own 49% of share in the company, and the 51% has to come from the sponsor. So he has to give an NOC saying that he doesn't have any issue starting the company.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. And for industry license, is it any different for a no? It's not. No, it's the same. We're going to start a restaurant. It has to be from the mainland. You have to register yourself with the mainland. So yeah, for this is not for an industrial license. Following additional documents are required. If you're going to, like I said, if you're going to set up a company in the free zone, one of the free zones, then you'll have to give a feasibility study as to how feasible it would be to, it would be for you to run the company. It would also contain, such and such terms where how you're going to procure certain goods to manufacture a certain thing. That's what I mean. The feasibility study basically contains that. And existing company profile, if there's an already existing company, you are going to send the profile. Let's say you have a company in India and you also want to register a company similar to that, or something, a subsidiary of that in UAE. Then in that case, you'll have to file the existing company profile as well, and information related to the investor. Whoever is investing, let's say a PE vehicle. A PE vehicle is basically a private equity vehicle. Somebody who wants to invest in your company, and they're going to give you some money, and you'll have to disclose as to who's the investor as well. So these are the essentials that you need to documents that you need to produce before the before registration of the company. Priyanka, can we move on to the next slide? This is with respect to a Singapore, incorporation in Singapore, where once you file a name application, a company name application, it is going to take 120 days to approve, get approved. Only then you can start the registration process. Next slide, Priyanka. I don't know if many of you are aware of this. Singapore is actually considered as the #1 country by World Bank for ease of doing business. I think they considered Singapore as #1 country for almost 6-7 consecutive years. So yeah, if you are preparing to do business in Singapore, you're supposed to have one of the directors as a Singapore resident. A citizen from Singapore has to be one of your directors. You cannot simply start your own business. There are actually companies which also provide this service. What they do is, let's say Flipkart decided to start their company in Singapore. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the fact that Flipkart is a Singapore company and not an Indian company. Though many of the shareholders are from India, it is actually incorporated in Singapore. And I'll tell you as to why. Or if one of you could tell me as to why Flipkart is registered in Singapore at the end of the class. So while incorporating a company in Singapore, it's a mandatory provision that you're supposed to have a director who's a resident of Singapore. And the second one is that you're supposed to have a company secretary, which is very similar to what we have in India. Even in India, we are supposed to have a secretary. And the third pointer is a Singapore registered address. Unlike the US or the Dubai, you are supposed to have a registered address, and this needs to have a specific space. It needs to have a physical space to get a registered address. You cannot have a virtual address like in the case of Dubai or in US. They need to have a specific physical place to run the business. And it needs to have at least one shareholder. So the one shareholder can be a Singapore resident, or basically he has to be a Singapore resident. If there's a second shareholder, it can be anyone. There's no stipulation for that. There's no stipulation as to how much he can hold. Sometimes they are, in many cases, they are just nominal directors. In case of Flipkart, they have nominal directors as Singapore resident director. They don't have an actual active director with them. Next slide. Can you move on to next slide? Yeah, the next is appointing a company secretary. A company secretary must be a natural person, like in the case, an individual person, and they have to be a local resident from Singapore. Okay, they cannot be, a company secretary cannot be appointed elsewhere. They cannot be, their work cannot be outsourced as well. They have to be from the local area only. And these company, for certain types of companies, the secretary must be a qualified individual. What they mean by qualified individual is that a qualified individual is a resident or a citizen of Singapore who's qualified to register your company. That's what they mean by a qualified individual. The main responsibility of the company secretary is to ensure that company adheres to statutory requirement as required by Singapore law. This is pretty neat and rudimentary. Basically, how company secretaries work in India. It's similar to it's quite similar to what we have in India. So the company secretary has to ensure that everything in the company is in place. If something goes wrong, he'll be held responsible and could also be criminally liable for any offense committed by the company. And in here, one other rule is a sole director of a company cannot be the company secretary. So if there's if let's say a director, and in the previous slide we understood that the director has to be a local resident of Singapore. If there's already a local resident of Singapore who's a director, there has to be another company secretary. And he himself cannot, a company secretary himself cannot be both director and a company secretary. The next point is it is important to note that the director is still, everything is, while you're doing business, it should be compliant with ACRA. ACRA is basically accounting and corporate regulatory authority. Everything goes according to ACRA. You are supposed to file everything. You have to register everything with ACRA. That is true. Okay. Can we move on to next slide, Priyanka? This is getting the Singapore address. This is one of the Easily Corp is a virtual office. They actually provide, Easily Corp or digital mailbox. They have the virtual office. Like I previously said that you need to have physical space, but in this case, Easily Corp is going to provide you a virtual space, but this virtual space would be run, it will be run from their physical space. So it is still mandatory that you have to run a physical. You need to have a physical space to run a company. But then again, Easily Corp's physical space holds, since it holds a virtual office, you can direct all the mails or any correspondence or any notices to this digital or their virtual office mail. And Easily Corp is one of those websites which also provides registered office addresses. Next slide, Priyanka. Yeah, we had discussed this previously. There has to be at least one shareholder, and that one shareholder can be the director. And a shareholder can either be a Singapore citizen or Singapore permanent resident or a foreign individual or a foreign entity. A shareholder, there should be one shareholder, but there can be other shareholders as well. And if there are other shareholders, they can be anything. They can be, like in the case of Flipkart, the other shareholders are basically their foreign entity in terms, in view of the Singapore government. They are basically foreign entities. and like all companies and all the shares of company are issued in Singapore dollars, and everything should be in. I mean, even the the capitalization or the paid up capital of a company has to be one Singapore dollar. But in the case of Dubai, it has to be one US dollar. When you start a company, you're supposed to have a paid up capital as like you're to start a company, right? You need to have some kind of amount to start a company. And in case of Singapore, it's one Singapore dollar. In case of Dubai, it's one USD. Next slide, Priyanka. So you need to have SSIC. SSIC is basically no share. That's not actually share. You cannot distribute it in decimals. At least like none that I'm like I've never heard of a case where share has been split in decimals and then distributed. So SSIC is basically a Singapore standard industrial classification. Before you start a company, you are supposed to choose, like you should classify your business under SSIC, saying that, let's say you're into the business of manufacturing ice creams. You have to classify yourself as your primary business as manufacturing ice creams. You can also have two kinds of businesses, two activities. The secondary business could be anything. It could be, say, since you make ice cream, you can also say that you make gelatos, or you're into producing milkshakes as well. But you have to classify your primary business activity, and this comes under something called as SSIC. And SSIC is basically Singapore Standard Industrial Classification. It is going to give a list of things that list of businesses that you can run in Singapore. And like I said, each company can have two activities. One is primary and the other one is secondary. Can we move to next slide, Priyanka? So one good thing about Singapore is that in India, we have like our financial year starts from April to the first FY1. Okay, the first quarter of FY. Right now we are currently running FY22 to FY23, right? This is financial year 22 to 23, and the quarter one of financial year starts from April 1st and ends at June 30. I'm assuming that you're all aware of that. But in this case, you can start your financial year from the day of incorporation of your company. Let's say your company started today, and you can like set your financial year as per your needs. Today is June 21st. You can set this date as your first day of the financial year. It's up to you. But in India, it's uniform. The financial year a new financial year starts from April 1st. And in US, it starts from January 1st. But if you go to China or Taiwan, it starts from January 1st. But in Singapore, it starts from the day of incorporation of your company, unless you decide otherwise. If you want to start it from, say, Jan 1st for the sake of convenience and clarity, it's up to you. Next slide, Priyanka. So yeah, you will need to provide them with the identification documents like passport and also proof of address. And the proof of address has to be a Singapore address, since there's going to be at least one resident director. It has to be his proof of address. And for corporate shareholders, you're supposed to give details of the beneficial owners of the companies, because sometimes there are going to be beneficial owners, and sometimes there are going to be owners who are like working like CEOs, like they'll be working owners, and some of them are beneficial owners. Let me give an example of a beneficial owner. That would be a private equity. I'm assuming that some of you are aware of the recent fiasco with Zilingo. Zilingo is a B2B company which is registered and incorporated in Singapore. Okay, and they also had some kind of altercation with one of the PE companies, that is a private equity company, and that private equity company could be termed as one of the beneficial owners of the company. And yeah, you'll have to produce your all your documents, like I said, passport, and your Aadhaar, and even your utility bills and incorporation certificate if the company has already been incorporated in India or any other country for due diligence. Yeah, can we move to next? Yeah. So yeah, now like now that you've provided everything, your company and your there will be a company constitution in Singapore. It's called as constitution of the company. So there's going to be your company will be newly registered and constituted, and you'll also receive the certificate of incorporation, and yeah, you'll also get corporate pass. Corporate pass is basically it's a digital access platform by Singapore government, where you will have access to all websites. If you have corporate pass, you can go to any website in Singapore, or any government domain website. Basically, you can go there and check out, like you can access their articles. You can also access any material uploaded by them. So that's the advantage of getting a corporate pass. Next point, Priyanka. Okay, the previous one. Can we go back? See, when a company
The
is
previous, is
the
previous.
one before that.
Yes.
Okay. The previous one, Priyanka, the 13th slide number 13. So yeah, you are supposed to get your identification. When I said identification, you're supposed to give your passport, even Aadhaar in some cases, and your proof of address, that is the address of the resident director. Okay.
So
And
I want to know, what do you mean by targeted financial sanctions?
we also cannot work with the designated individuals and entities that are subject to see, targeted financial sanctions are let's say a particular company is blacklisted. Okay. For reasons that they use a certain shell company. They managed to set up a shell company in Singapore, and they use it for money laundering. And these companies would come under targeted financial sanctions. Targeted financial sanctions is when you sanction certain limitations on this company.
But how would they even come to know that there's something like money laundering happening, or like do they have a portal, or do they look at their records? Maybe in their countries they are with their
Yeah,
bank.
if they've defaulted in their country, like that would be gathered. Like I said in the previous point, we did speak about due diligence. On due diligence, if these companies are found to be blocked, or if these companies are found to be, blacklisted, and if they come under the term called as, like targeted financial sanctions, they'll obviously, the Singapore government won't be able to work with them, and won't be able to incorporate such companies.
So do you want to say that, does it also mean that they are required to take sanctions from the Singapore government for some finances, or some maybe a loan or any kind of that thing?
You're getting confused with the word sanction. See, sanction doesn't mean permission. Here, sanction means it's more like a reprimand. Recently US and the European Union, they impose sanctions on Russia. When they mean sanctions, it means they are imposing some kind of limitations, and they are placing some kind of embargo on trade transaction. So sanctions mean not permission here. Sanctions mean basically you're punishing them.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, can we move to next point? And the next slide, slide 15.
Also, can you just repeat the beneficial owners of the company last slide? Can you just explain?
See, these beneficial owners are basically they may be part of the the governing team of the company. Okay. For example, I gave an example of a private equity. What does a private equity do? they do not actually do any, they have nothing to do with running the company. All that they do is they invest some kind of fund in the company. They own a certain percentage of the company. Okay, and then sometimes they get involved in the management or running of running business of the company, or sometimes they refrain themselves from doing that. So they are called as the beneficial owners.
So is it like the FIs and the DIs that we have here in India?
Yeah, something very similar to that. Yeah, FI and DI.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, at the end of each financial year, the company needs to hold AGM. This is very similar to what we have, but this doesn't. LLC in US doesn't have this. They don't necessarily have to hold AGM. But if you are going to open, incorporate a company in Singapore, you have to hold AGM. If you're incorporating company in Dubai, you don't have to. If it's in US, then you don't have to. But if you're incorporating a corporation in US, then you have to hold AGM.
You
And
have just mentioned that within 6 months, but I didn't get this. Like, the end of each financial year.
yeah,
So normally in India, the financial year is from April to March, right?
it's April to March. Yes.
Yeah. So that way, it's 12 months. So this has to be.
It's see, sometimes there's going to be a delay of annual general meeting, right? They cannot go beyond 6 months. That's it's not phrased properly. It's not been. I know the sentence has not been constructed properly. It means you're supposed to.
Same as in India also, same thing.
Yeah. So it's pretty much what we have in India.
Okay, so technically, between the year from April to March, within the first 6 months, you need to hold an AGM. Is it like that?
No.
After completion of the financial year, say for example, 2020 March, it has been closed, the financial year. So before September, you have to close, conducted your AGM.
Okay, got this. Thank you.
Yeah. So the second point is the financial statements will need to be prepared for the AGM, and this is pretty plain and neat. And annual returns will have to be filed with ACRA. We did speak about accounting and corporate regulatory authority, which is ACRA, within 1 month of AGM. So yeah, that's about it, I believe. Next slide, Priyanka. Do we have another slide? So yeah, this is an overview of how things work in India, US, and Singapore. In India, we have public-private company, limited liability partnership, one-person company, general partnership, sole proprietary. Okay. In US, we did discuss about this last week. We have C Corp, S Corp, and LLC. I think someone had issues with C Corp and S Corp. If you still have doubts, I'll try to finish it within a minute. Does anyone have doubt between C Corp and S Corp? Okay, I don't think anyone does. Okay. And Singapore is very similar to what we have. They have limited liability partnership, limited liability company as well, and a limited partnership and general partnership. And with respect to taxation, this part has no relevance to the topic we have here. And I just included this so that you'll get a better picture as to how things run in different countries. So that this is all of these are comparable. You can have you can do a comparative study between India, US, and Singapore. So the taxation for company in India is 33.99%, and the corporate tax rate in US is 40%. Only in C Corp. Remember, this is only with respect to C Corp, not with S Corp or LLC. And Singapore imposes flat corporate tax at 17%, which is way lesser than what we have in India. And this is why we have a lot of companies, going to Singapore and starting their businesses. Or even you must have, seen a lot of startups moving to Singapore for this reason. And the business license is required. We need to have PAN and TAN, professional tax registration. And in here, we are supposed to have business license. In US, we are supposed to have business licenses for running any business. And every employee needs to have something called EIN. We did speak about this, employer identification number. And every corporation needs to have acquire a tax ID number as well. And in here, certain businesses and industries are required to get licenses or permit. This is what we have in India and US as well. Goods and sale tax registration is mandatory if annual turnover is more than 1 million Singapore dollars. And every company needs to register under Central Provident Fund registration once the entity has hired an employee. And this is plain. That's simple. Okay. So yeah, that's about it. I mean, you can. I don't have to explain this. You can go through this and read it for yourself. If you have doubts, you can ask me now. Are there any doubts? Guys, do you have any doubts?
No.
None at all?
No, nothing so far.
Okay. Okay, there's one question by Shubham Srivath, I think. I was just wondering, you don't have to answer this. What sort of budget are we looking at to incorporate a company? You need $1. That's what I said. The paid up capital is $1 for starting incorporating the company in US. I mean, in Singapore. So yeah.
Yeah, I just want to ask one thing. Yeah, is Singapore is more flexible than India and US procedure, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is, yes.
So can you give the 1-2 example of that flexibility of Singapore?
See, in Singapore, once you get the name of the company, the process is quite simple. For the simple reason that there is no red tape and the red tape issue or any corruption in Singapore. That's one of the main reasons why Singapore is the go-to destination for for startups and companies. Another reason being the tax purpose. In India, you have to pay a hefty sum of 33.99% of tax, but that's not the case in Singapore. And in US, right now it's 40%, but the Joe Biden administration government wants to increase that as well. They want to go above 40% and impose more corporate tax. Another reason being in India, when you're incorporating a company, it's going to take more time than usual. Let's say in Singapore it takes about 30 days, but India it would take at least about 60 to it can stretch up to
3-4 months easily.
Exactly, I've seen cases where it stretches up to 6 months. So that's the case in India, and then again there are so many compliances, you have to take so many permissions, but that's not the case in Singapore. It's quite straightforward in Singapore. That's why it's number one in the entire world.
Or else the procedures are mostly same or in all country, right? Near to.
Sorry.
All the procedures are similar, most properly.
Yeah. It's
just a little difference.
There's a little difference. Yeah, in Singapore you need to have a company secretary, but that's not necessary in US or in Dubai. So yeah, and in Singapore you're supposed to have a physical office from where you have to run the business, but that's not the case in US or Dubai. And US, it's not necessary that you need to have one resident person. I mean, of course you need to have a registered agent, but otherwise you don't need to have anyone. So there are minor differences, but they're all pretty much the same. And the major advantage of you may all be wondering as to USA imposes about 40% tax. Dubai doesn't impose any tax at all, and Singapore imposes 70% tax. Okay, it makes sense, but why would people still go to US? There's one major advantage in going to US, that's venture capitalism. It's easy. People start their companies in US simply because of the reason that they can raise money. It's like US is like the Bombay of India. You can. It's like the country of dreams. You can live the American dream. You go to US, somebody is going to fund you. You're most likely to find investors in US than in Dubai or in Singapore. So that's one of the main reasons why many people still prefer going to US. I mean, if you're intending to raise cash to like start your business, US is the right place to go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, guys. I'll see you all next week. If you have any doubts, I think we did have some questions about LLC, series LLC. I'll try to clarify, your doubts on that, in the next week. I hope you guys have any, I hope you guys don't have any doubts from this class.
No.
Guys, if you have any doubts, please raise them right now so that, in the next class, we can begin with new concepts and there's no confusion.
Hello, sir.
Sorry?
Hello, sir. It's not actually a doubt, but I find this thing. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, please.
I find this thing to be rather cumbersome, in the UAE context as well as in US context.
I
find one local agent, and for the UAE, it's 49. Sorry.
That's what even I felt. To be honest, even I felt that we could have maybe split the classes into just US and then Dubai and then Singapore. But since there's we have only 1 hour, I'm allocated 1 hour, but I somehow stretched up to another. I took another hour of yours and tried to explain, but still, yeah, it's a little cumbersome because we're dealing with 3 countries at once. I get it.
Yeah.
So you know what we can do. So these are actually introductory sessions, for an entry and expansion. That's why this is the case. But moving forward, we'll be targeting only one jurisdiction at a time. So I think our problem will be addressed.
Yeah, I think that
Sir, this was not actually my question. This is misunderstood.
It was about the procedure that is cumbersome.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The thing that we need to find, let's say in the UAE context, 49% of the shares being held by a local national. So don't you think this would be, rather we need to butter him up, find a local guy there that be my, shareholder or director?
And with the sole purpose of protecting their their interest as well. They want to protect their personal interest to some extent, right? I mean, tomorrow, see, that way you'll be able to provide a job, or you would be running your business with the localite. See, when they're inviting, when they're inviting you to set up your business in their country, it's a symbiotic relationship. Even they're expecting something from it. So that's one of the.
Okay.
Sorry?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Guys, do we have more questions, or we can conclude the concept session for today and move on to the exercise and feedback? All right. So before we move on, I want to know, how did you find the class?
Very nice. Knowledgeable. Yeah.
Great.
This concept is clear between 3 states. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So if you get some work regarding, if you get some advisory work for, let's say, US or Singapore, do you think you will be able to ace it?
Not immediately, but it will take little time. Definitely.
All right. Of course, it won't happen immediately, but then do you feel that the concepts are clarified to that extent at least?
Yes, basic concept. We can say the basic concept is because of the comparison, because he has given a good comparison between the 3 states over there. not three. It is a four states of India, Dubai, USA, and Singapore. Yeah, Singapore was little hard for me to understand. Again, I will going to watch this video, especially for the Singapore. Rather than else was very much clear to me right now. Thank you for this information.
Okay. Does anyone else have a feedback for today's session? Anyone? You can type it in the chat box if you guys don't want to unmute yourself. Okay, so this means that either the session was very nice or very bad. I'm not able to really make out. Okay.
Session was very good and it was very knowledgeable.
Okay.
And I learned about the states of UAE, USA, Singapore, Dubai. It was good knowledgeable. I found it very good today.
Okay.
Comparative to other classes.
Okay, that's nice. All right. So, Bhargav, you have your feedback right here. It was very good and informative and very insightful and knowledgeable and everything. I really hope that, the following sessions continue to be the same. I mean, I'm pretty sure that they will be. So let us move on to the exercise now that you have given the feedback. So I'm just quickly going to share. I'm really sorry, guys. I'm unable to switch on my camera because of some internet issues. If I switch on my camera, then a lot of bandwidth would be consumed and my voice will start breaking. So
Sorry, ma'am, to disturb you. May I? Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, the concept is clear. If any question comes in future, so how can I ask or how can I solve that issue?
So, Anshu, remember you had scheduled a Calendly session with me once?
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, so you just have to follow the same process.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Great. All right. Okay, so let us move on to first, let us discuss today's exercise, and then all the participants who have not attempted the exercise of the last week, they can leave while I give the feedback on the exercise, weekly exercise of last week. All right. So just quickly going to share my screen. Okay. Yeah. So today's exercise is on drafting clauses of a memorandum of understanding and incorporation of businesses in the US, Dubai, and Singapore. The objectives are quite clear. It is to understand the intricacies of a memorandum of understanding, to learn how to draft an MOU, and to understand how to incorporate businesses in US, Dubai, and Singapore. So we won't be asking you questions based on USA because we've covered that in the last class. So today we will probably be focusing on either Dubai or Singapore. The reference material will be slides that will be shared after class today, and the chapter on types of business structures and incorporation in Dubai, Singapore, and US under the module International Expansion and Foreign Entry on your LMS. The first exercise is for drafting of an MOU of 10 marks. So Anglo Gas Limited is a company incorporated in India that is engaged in supplying natural gas to its consumers in transportation, industrial, commercial, and domestic segments using pipelines and trucks. The gas network infrastructure of Anglo Gas Limited has its presence in both Indian and international market. Burn Materials Limited is another Indian company which has approached Anglo Gas Limited and informed that it had developed a prototype carbon fiber made pipeline with better pressure resistance, physical impacts, and climatic variations and can immediately detect natural gas leakage. Both the parties decided to enter into a memorandum of understanding for a period of 5 years wherein Burn Materials would install and test its pipelines in selected locations of gas network infrastructure owned by Anglo Gas Limited. If Anglo Gas is satisfied, it would purchase the said gas pipeline from Burn Materials. So based on these facts, you have to draft the following clauses of MOU between Anglo Gas Limited and Burn Materials Limited. So the first is the parties to the MOU. The second is the recital clause. then the termination clause of MOU, non-contractual obligations, and termination of the MOU. So you just have to, there are also hints that have been given. Use those hints and draft the clauses accordingly. Please do not copy paste from the MOU that we will be sharing after class. Then the second exercise is in continuance with the first one. So Burn Materials Limited has decided to create an international presence and expand its business into 3 different jurisdictions, that is the US, Dubai, and Singapore. The company has approached you to answer the questions and write a legal opinion about the following. First is mention the types of business structures available in Singapore and Dubai. And second, assuming that Burn Materials Limited intends to register a company in Dubai, state the steps to follow to get the company registered in Dubai. Do we have any doubts pertaining to the exercise? All right, let us now discuss. Okay, let us now discuss the feedback. This file that we are going to discuss today has been attempted by Mansi Gautam, and she has done a commendable job while attempting this particular exercise. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Just give me 1 second. Sharing my screen again. Okay, so, all right. So let us first discuss the first exercise, which was the question was, what are the types of incorporations that can be registered for commencing a business in USA? So you have written sole proprietorship, limited liability company, and business corporations. And under that, there's S Corp and C Corp, and there's a non-profit organizations. So here I have commented that there are also types of partnerships which can be registered, but I'm willing to let it go since the second question was about what types of partnerships are available for incorporation. The commendable job is that, you have given explanation as to, what is a sole proprietorship, a limited liability company, business corporation. So you have defined these concepts very well. Then the second question was, what are the types of partnerships available for incorporation? So here you have mentioned general partnership, limited liability partnership, and limited liability limited partnership. So you have under limited liability limited partnership, you have also mentioned that, California doesn't recognize limited liability limited partnerships, but recognizes these partnerships formed in other states. Since it is not recognized by many states, it's not advisable to form this type of partnership. It's a brilliant statement. So this answer is again perfect. You have defined every partnership precisely. So good job. What are the requirements for incorporating a limited liability partnership? So here the answer is very precisely formulated. You have written that a limited liability partnership is is similar to a general partnership, as all the partners actively manage the business, but it limits their liability for one another's actions. The partners are fully responsible for their debts and legal liability of the business. So the an LLP is a separate legal entity that and has perpetual succession, and the partners will not be held liable for wrongdoings of other partners. This is perfect. And you have mentioned that these are certain professions that are, so basically if you have to form an NLP, you must be either licensed as a lawyer, architect, or an accountant. This is perfect. A formal written agreement must be signed, and although the state of California recognizes LLPs, you have mentioned the requirements for registration of an LLP, so that is perfect. The second exercise was on drafting limited partnership agreements. So the first part you have mentioned, parties to contract, and it is hereby agreed, whereas the general partner and collectively called as partners have agreed to form a limited partnership under California Corporations Code and everything. So by filing declaration under the act on the date hereof. Okay. So this part is good. Now under partnership percentages, you must mention the numerical values of division of authority. You have just mentioned that the general partner shall determine the amount of distribution of percentage among the partners and the timing of all such distributions. But please mention what is the percentage. Okay. So under limited liability, you have only mentioned that the initial limited partner's liability for the partnership debts and obligations shall be limited to its capital contribution. You could have elaborated this clause a little bit, mentioning again the distribution of authority, like, how much power is concentrated in each partner's hands depending on what investments, the percentage of investments they have made. Under taxation, that is okay, that each partner shall send within 90 days the copy of partnership's federal, state and local income tax or information of returns. That is all right. Under inclusion of additional powers, you have written that a new member shall be added only after consent of 1/3 of the existing designated partners. Now, here, please understand that you cannot write 1/3 when you have two members. Like, just imagine, how will you divide two people into 1/3, and how will you count the votes, right? So be very diligent when you are drafting such clauses and entering numerical values or percentages. The same applies to admission of additional limited partners, that you have written that a person may acquire an interest in the partnership directly from the partnership and be admitted as an additional limited partner only with the approval of the general partner and 51% of all the partners. Now, if there are two partners, that is why it is very essential to set out how much power is concentrated in the hands of each partner. Because if you're giving 70% power in the hands of one partner and 30% in the other, then this clause makes sense, but you really have to set it out. Admission of substituted limited power. Okay. So written consent of general partner and 2.6 additional partners bound by the agreement. So I think the 2.6 is something, I believe it's an extrapolation from some other agreement. Please avoid doing that. Dissolution of partnership. This clause has been well drafted. You have mentioned the terms of dissolution and appointment of liquidator, and in which cases the general partner shall be deemed as a liquidator. So that is very well drafted. So the overall attempt is good. However, you need to be diligent about the facts that bind these agreements so that the clauses are reasonable. So for exercise 1, I've given a 9 on 10, and exercise 2 also I've given a 9 on 10 because your effort is really commendable. All right. So do we have any doubts pertaining to this particular exercise?
Actually, I had just one.
Yes. You're on mute, Jacinta. Hello? Hello? Yeah, Vasudev, the slides will be shared in your
Just
Discord.
1 minute. Huh?
Yeah. The slides are always shared in your Discord group.
Okay, I think I'm not getting my slide. I mean, I had something. Maybe I'll just book a calendar and discuss it.
Yeah, sure. No problem. No problem. All right. So I will see all of you next week. And have a, I cannot say good weekend. Okay, have a good week ahead. All right. So we can conclude today's session. In the meanwhile, please fill the feedback forms. They are essential and they help us understand, what is lacking and what are the lacunas, or if you're doing good, if that is the case. Please fill the feedback forms.
Thank you, Priyanka.
Okay, thank you.